Well, welcome everyone. My name is Sean Boynton with Rentech Global Solutions. This is our product webinar today, and we have Jason Conklin from Argo Sciences. He's going to be going over some of his products, and we're excited to have him today. Take it away, Jason.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, everyone, for your time. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Just give you background on Argo Sciences, and then our agenda, of course, about me, history and formation, strategy and mission, what we actually do, the team that we have, what our motivation was, and then our three main pillars of product: Argo Insights, Argoponics, and Argo Power. So, guys, I know I've met one or two of you, but that's it. But my background's quite broad, I should say, not necessarily extensive, but I've been around. I started off in IT, went in the military for a while. I did hazmat, I did weather, I did climatology. My final job was working for Raytheon. I was in orbitology there and doing reconnaissance, and then from Raytheon, that broke me into the aerospace field of things, and that's when I got to a private company called Terran Global Corporation that hired me to be their R&D lead for establishing space habitats on the moon. I know that sounds pretentious, but it literally was what it was. And that sounds a bit, I'll explain a little bit on that. What the goal was to make a mock habitat of what life would be like on the moon, on the lunar surface. And in doing so, we had to encompass the entire environment, how water is reclaimed, reused, and recycled, how we would grow our food, sustain, and everything that would sustain life. So that you want to make sure you need fresh air, you got to convert CO2 back into oxygen. And of course, you also have to make power. And in doing all that, I really enjoyed the work that I did for them, of course, proprietary, but I learned that all of this applies to the environment here on Earth. And I'm like, if we can build stuff on the moon to live on, we can also live in Antarctica if we wanted to. But just theoretically, if we can achieve that level of environmental isolation, then we don't have to have the impact that we are having on the environment now, because it can all be contained and modified, and then also at the same time sustainable in a sustainable manner, that we can live, in an ongoing way of life without having so much disruption. Obviously, in space, you can't take the trash out. There's no biodegradation or anything like that because there's no atmosphere. So it's everything's got to be encompassed in that whole process. Our mission as Argo Sciences, environmental innovation is the name of the game. So we take disparate technologies, we look at different prototypes, and in between the team gets together, we do a think tank style, kind of just try to strategize how we're going to go about solving a problem. And the one thing we do in our research side is making sure that something's not already done. There's no sense in reinventing the wheel. It's just not being applied in the way that we want it, or the way that we need it, or the way it's going to fix the problem that we're trying to solve. So our ability to imagine and think outside the box is kind of how we pride ourselves. That was my main goal. Is like, okay, when you're talking about encompassing the entire environment, how do we reclaim that, reproduce it, and make it sustainable?
California, or
and there's some question. Oh. Sorry. Okay. And then we try to focus on 1, 2, or 3 at a time at the most, and get those to the efficacy, and then spin them off and send them on their way, which turns into products that Rentech and people like you can sell. Just a quick overview of the team. Andrew is my main operations manager. Josiah Morehouse is the all IT development. He's the other key person. And then I also have backend engineers, Greg Reeder and Joe Cataldo. Those guys are on a different level when it comes to designing energy systems. Joey's, believe it or not, got a master's in photology, which I didn't even know was a thing, but he can basically turn sunlight into anything. And then Brian Wagenseller, old colleague of mine, who was worked for NOAA, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, a very good extensive knowledge on climatology. So when we go to put solutions in a given area, we tap all these resources. So, okay, what's going to work in location X? Let's say you're in Santa Fe, New Mexico, versus North Dakota. We would, we look at how the rainfall is going to happen, what your climate's like, how dry it is, how wet it is. Are there other factors that would come into play that would affect your solution? If it's going to be for solar, how we accommodate for the days of sunlight or lack thereof. If it's going to be for water reclamation, of course, we accommodate for, desert conditions, how much water we can reclaim, and what's going to be lost to the atmosphere. So we really go from the top all the way down. Everyone knows about the problems we face. I'm just going to blast through these quickly to get to the meat and potatoes of the product. So we know the climate's changing. It's not going to stop. No matter what your political persuasion is, the climate will change. So that stuff's, keep those things relevant. The fact is, yeah, we're going to deal with wet in places that were dry, and dry in places that were wet, and that will always be a thing. Environmental degradation, of course, is everywhere. By urbanization and having these big swaths of land being mowed down, we can actually green up what's concrete, and that's an important thing, which you guys are a huge integral part of. And then, of course, healthier food. These mass-produced stuff that's manufactured is GMOs and so forth have a lot of negative consequences we're finding out, and then they're not as nutritious and not as healthy for you. So growing food ourselves, even in the urban environment, actually gives us a cleaner product. When the farm is only a few hundred yards from the plate, as opposed to in South America or Central America getting shipped up and ripening en route, there's all kinds of things that happen in that whole process that really degrade the quality of the food. Having it right down the street or on your rooftop is a huge advantage. It's also far more sustainable that way because you eliminate the carbon footprint of the shipping, the carbon footprint of the storage, the carbon footprint of the processing is all out of the works as well, because that's a huge industrial impact that's cut out of the equation when you're growing stuff on site. So it's or relatively locally. Our focus, I mentioned Argoponics, Argo Insights, and Argo Power. They're the three pillars that we came up with as far as how Argo Science is conducted. And why you guys need to know this is because you can sell anything we do. I'm sure there's, if you have customization that's needed, we will find a solution, and we'll be able, I'm sure I'll discuss with Mark Shankman on how that compensation package would look, but they're going to be very subjective based on what we're doing. But all the consulting services we offer, all those engineering skills we have, and all of the design and implementation services we offer, you're welcome to sell that stuff. Argoponics encompasses all the food. Argo Power is all the energy, which is also biofuels. And then Argo Insights is our R&D core. That's the very center part of everything, research and development. Okay, so I'm sorry, I skipped that slide, but solar irradiance is included. I mean, this basically the top of the atmosphere all the way down. When we do insights, we look at everything, take it all, we can analyze all that stuff, figure out what's going to affect you and what's not going to affect you, depending on where you're trying to establish either your farm or your village or whatever you're looking to do. Argoponics, I'm sure you guys have seen some of this stuff before. The sky's the limit on the two main lines we carry. The hydroponic side we do the stacky gardens. On the aeroponic side we do the tower gardens. They're not limited to that. If you guys if you come across a customer who's got something that those don't work, there is a way to customize something. We can make, a lot of this stuff can be 3D printed. We can produce PVC solutions to people that need some other type of configuration. We can do all that. It's not terribly difficult, but the one size fits all thing, the sky's the limits. I mean, everything's out there that you need to do. So it's just finding the right stuff and putting it in play. Just show you what's up and coming. Some of the stuff we're working on. Biosynthetics is a huge thing. Taking all your pulp, your stalk, everything that's left over, and making plastics with it that we can 3D print. That's the next evolution we're looking forward to in the next probably 4 or 5 years. We'll see that. I love that's a Carlsberg beer. Carlsberg is out of Denmark, I believe. And that's actually a chitin. That's a plant-based bottle. And if you know how a plant works, as soon as it dries out, it disintegrates. While it's wet, though, it's watertight. So that beer stays fine until you drink it. And then as soon as that completely biodegrades, literally, and that actually it's peat moss. It'll be like fertilizer. It's good for your garden. You can leave it there. It's not going to trash up a landfill. But that's some stuff that's on the horizon. Bioreactors, these are being heavily improved upon to make electrical power from algae, and you can see how it's all enclosed like that. And some of these are really elaborate. They look really impressive. They don't have to be that cool, but you can actually. But the beauty of this, the one we did for the space habitat, which I can't show you because it's proprietary and copyrighted, but we used bioluminescent blue-green algae from Hong Kong Harbor to simulate a blue sky effect. And then University of Tokyo has a rubbery glass product that literally bends. So if a micrometeorite hit it, it would actually bend and flex. And then that would produce your carbon dioxide to oxygen conversion in your habitat. But the beauty of that, sunlight gets through the water, gives you radiation shielding. So you could have an outdoor, quasi-outdoor garden where you feel like you're outside, you get the fresh air from the plants and all that, but you're breathing out your CO2, it's picking an oxygen. And the beauty of that is it's making electrical power in the process. If you remember back in school when we did the thing where you stuck the copper and zinc lead into the potato and lit a light bulb up, maybe many of you may have seen that one. Same concept. It's the acidity from the algae that's being neutralized and generated electrical power that way. This one probably a little more up your speed. That's the artist that will never be known as Jason's rendition of the solar power tower, and that's just about the same size as one of the tower gardens, roughly about 6 feet tall, at 30 inches wide at the base. That will power the three tower system, the family garden system, indefinitely. So that especially with after what happened with the hurricanes here last year in Florida, there were people that were, once you lose power for 4 or 5 days, your crops are finished. They're not going to make it. So this would circumvent that, and you'd power them indefinitely. And I'm expecting the retail price. I'm trying to keep it below $300. That would make it easy sell for you. And that product I'm hoping to have out by August. I want to get it out before hurricane season. It's just the challenge right now is on the UL listing, but so it's got a battery pack in it. very small one that's going to enough to power those 3 towers, but again, indefinitely. You guys can, that thing runs off the grid and just keeps on going. Water generation, I think you guys already have your own that Rentech is already working with. This is just one example. You can generate atmospheric water generators. You've probably seen this where the sun hits this panel. The panel has a photovoltaic portion that's running a fan. Middle of the desert, we can make make water. And that's what it's doing. It's literally forming a rain cloud inside of that panel, so you can produce water in the middle of the desert. We do carry those. I think Mark and I did discuss that. And then, of course, the hydroponics applications are almost limitless. Once you get on the commercial or the custom side of things, we really can go to town with what we give you. I mean, there's we can design things that go in situ. If somebody's got a awkward, like this one to the lower left has got a round shape to it, we can actually design and build those for you. Again, if someone's got a very unique situation that you need to fit something in, there's always a solution. So don't ever turn somebody away. And then, of course, you've seen the indoor aspect of things. Indoor gardening is becoming is now an increasing trend as well. We also do the alternative power. These are horrible and sad when I see these big, huge solar farms, because you've taken a whole bunch of green space and turned it into inert space where you can't use that space, but the green footprint is gone. So your CO2 sink that was there before is now eliminated. And then, you know, you're producing power with it, but it winds up washing out because the gain environmentally is just as much lost, just as quickly. So it's really not the model we're going with. Argo Sciences aims for taking what's already paved. So in this case, rooftops. This is a way, you know, it's solar shingles are definitely a better alternative. And because that's your rooftop is already inert space, it's not going to be used. If you're not going to green roof it, then go with the solar shingle. And the other thing is we're doing what are called private power microgrids. So instead of actually being a public utility, it's a private utility. We combine the low voltage and high voltage things together. So some stuff only requires 12 volts direct current. Most of your devices today, your televisions, your smartphones, your laptops, tablet PCs, so on. A lot of these things don't require the 110 that's coming from the grid. The only stuff you need the grid for, your bigger items, of course, your refrigerator, your HVAC, and those kinds of things. But you can really minimize it a great deal. And those can be powered on, you know, backup stand-up batteries that they're not very large batteries, because you skip the inverter and keep the home lit throughout a hurricane without a problem, which is a huge advantage. And of course, there's a whole plethora of low voltage devices out there, like regular lamps that plug in with a USB cord, stereo systems, and so on. It's just a quick sample of that. And then getting in urban gardens, we can put a garden just about anywhere. You can see the different applications. I do want to point out on the left side of this that the glass that you see is photovoltaic glass. It is a solar glass. So it's also a solar panel and allowing light through. We're starting to, it's difficult to do here in Florida. It's a unique application, but we can do geothermal cooling with earth tubes, the cooling and heating where it moderates temperature. So if you have it, not necessarily what you're going to do in a home, but you can. But for greenhouses, this should be by default, because what it does is if you get extreme heat or extreme cold in certain areas, it keeps the greenhouse the temperature of the ground, which is usually, if you're like in Michigan or somewhere, 50, 55, maybe down in the high 40s, but not very cold. You got to go down below the frost line, but you put this in, it keeps the air moderated inside your greenhouse, which is really nice. Then down here in Florida, our ground temperature is still about 75 degrees. It's actually still pretty relatively warm for our comfort, but it's a lot cheaper to cool a 75-degree house down to 72 or 71 than it is to cool a 95-degree house. So if you're defaulting your home to the ground temperature and then moderating that, it's much, much more cost effective. And now we get into the fun stuff of what the deep dive is on, low impact development. So we're going to talk about Atlantis, the Atlantis products, and the how this whole thing ties in with Rentech and what Mark is looking at, what you guys are looking at doing. The concept of low impact development is basically, so water stays where it lands. When you build a subdivision, you know, we have been with mass urbanization, we've been paving a lot of spaces. We've taken all places that would previously be pervious and turn them solid. Traditional civil engineering is designed around getting the water out of the city as fast as possible to prevent flooding. That's good for flooding because you limit or minimize flooding to some extent. It's not very effective all the time because you have, you know, extreme events. However, it removes the natural process of cleaning the water. When you get to a sensitive area like our lagoon here on the Intercoastal Waterway and on the east coast of Florida, you have a mass flush of fresh water that's not been processed at all by nature. In other words, all the phosphates, nitrogen, all that fertilizer from the center part of the state, and everything it picked up on the road coming down, all the dirt, all the oil from the cars and so forth, is washed right out into the lagoon. That causes major disruptions in the chemical balance of that, which causes algal blooms. It causes red tides. It gives you a whole bunch of impact on the aquatic life that lives on the bottom feeders that can't move when the water changes. So they are stuck to breathe what they're not designed for, what they're not naturally consuming, and then they die. And that leads to a compounding systemic problem of furthering the environmental degradation. What you're looking at this slide here is showing two things. Which the upper right one's one of my favorite. It's in Sydney Harbor. That park is on the Sydney Harbor, which is one of the most environmentally sensitive areas in the world. The Great Barrier Reef is offshore. The Atlantis products are under that park. And the beauty of this is if you see how clear that water is, that's because of what they did here. No rainfall that hits that park washes out into the lagoon at all. It's completely reclaimed. It goes back in the city, and then it leaches back into the aquifers, and then it can be consumed for drinking. And it's clean, very clean. So really a remarkable system, and I'll get into how that all works. You can see on the roadway with the truck going over top of it, everything is weight bearing. The matrix below the road is actually capturing water. So if you had a major rain event, the road's not going to flood, well, at least not to an extreme extent. A lot of that's going to get reclaimed with this type of system, and most of it processed. The same with the bioswale you see is the space between the sidewalk and the roadway. Same concept there. The plants are naturally cleaning what would be falling on the ground. And then the goal of this, again, is to get the water to stay where it lands and then have a more natural process to it. And that way, when it does finally get to wherever your reclamation points are, if it's being released into the environment, it's clean water. It's not carrying all that nasty stuff with it. And the other thing about this, as opposed to traditional civil engineering systems, is it's much cheaper to maintain. Oops. Same thing here under sports and water field, sports field and water management. Let me say that a little slower. You've seen, I'm sure you guys have all seen football games where the field's a muddy mess. You know, this is the advantages. That's actually real grass on there, but all this is what's below it. And it's, again, the same technology is able to reclaim all that water. You'd have a nice green grass, which keeps it natural, but it never floods. So in the middle of a game, if it's raining, it's not turning into a sloshy pit. It's actually still maintaining a nice, healthy lawn to be running on. And then this water can be reclaimed and recirculated to keep that grass green, or it can be pumped out, and which is your choice, which we'll get into that in a little bit. Finally, the one I'm sure you guys are all anxious to get to, the grow walls. Turning a wall green is a fantastic greening. It's fantastic use of vertical space that otherwise is inert. Brings fresh air, it brings up people's moods, it brings up overall well-being, and it really beautifies a lot of stuff that's otherwise kind of bland and plain looking. And you can see here's indoor and outdoor applications of the grow wall. So has everyone here already learned about grow walls, Sean? Is it?
Yeah, I mean, you can go over it a little bit. Some are familiar with it, yes.
Okay, I'm going to shift here in a second and go into the deep. I got to change the screen that we're viewing. If I figure out how to do that. All right, can everyone see the Green City product overview?
Yes.
Or you are seeing that?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, good. All right. Green infrastructure challenge, we've already covered most of that. By having things green, so when you're taking like a grow wall, for example, a green roof, when you're changing your buildings, that there's one of the sales pitches of that is it's important to mention the energy savings. It's a lot cheaper on your HVAC to climate control your buildings when it's buffered out by that, because you're kind of putting the earth around your building. There's a beautiful green city that everyone loves to live in or look forward to seeing one day. Okay, so we'll get into, here's the product line that you're mainly are going to be carrying, that you already carry the grow walls, and there's also the Slim Pro, which is the smaller and more narrow one to the right. And I guess the important thing to mention, to point out here, the flow cell, the flow channel, and the rain tank. What it's doing is it's using a matrix of that's recycled polypropylene. What that actual matrix does is replicates the natural process that would happen when water falls in nature. So when it rains, water flows into a creek, which flows into a stream, which flows into a river, and the river flows into a bay or some other estuary, and eventually it makes its way out to the ocean in some way, shape, or form. All along that process, it's going through rocks, it's going through places that are full of wildlife, there's fish, things are being eaten, things are being deposited in it, and so forth. And it's basically a lot of churn, a lot of aeration. So a lot of the impurities are being cleaned out, and which is a good thing. So by the time it gets to the ocean, it's pretty harmless. It's no longer as volatile as what's coming off of a city street. So that's what the flow cell concept actually is doing for you. And it's the beauty of that. Now think of it, once you got that concept in, you realize it can be applied in so many different ways. It can be under the roadway, as you saw in the previous slide with the truck driving over it. It can be done in a matrix where it's keeping a flow channel, where it's making a space for you to store, or it can be applied in reclamation situations where it's getting rid of what would otherwise be an exposed waterway. One of the big areas here in Florida, we have a lot of retention ponds, which I'll show you a slide of, and that's a huge waste of real estate that we can get rid of because it's also very unhealthy. Let me go to the next one here. All right, so you have water conservation, surface detention, gray water recycling. That can be reclaimed. The gray water, gray water is stuff what comes out of your shower and your sinks and your dishwasher, not what comes out of your toilet. So do you understand the difference there? What comes out of the toilet is black water. And then, of course, for sustainable development, park spaces, those are huge. When you live in a place like Phoenix, reclaiming your water, which I'm surprised this isn't even the law to do there. Those golf courses go through so much water to irrigate and they don't reclaim any of it. It just evaporates right off. It's just gone. So the amount of money they spend doing that, they probably save a lot if they did this. In green city design, you can see all the different applications to it. Under the street, under the sidewalk, on the rooftop, there's really, the sky's the limit, or deep below is also the limit. I mean, you can really go to town with where we put these things. And the best time for you to catch this stuff is if you have a subdivision going in or you hear of one, before they go through their permitting and all their EPA stuff and everything, get a hold of them and see if, and if you can get this presentation in front of them, get a hold of them and see if that's something they'll entertain, because that's usually where you want to do this on the front end. Retrofitting is expensive and usually prohibitive, but doing it before they break ground and saving them all that grief is usually very inviting. So sizing water sensitive solutions is based on rainfall data, the catchment area, and the on-site detention tank. So in other words, these are customized based on where they're going for what amount of rainfall we're expecting. If it's a place that gets a lot of rain or gets major rain events, but very little in the interim, then we design it accordingly. Biofiltration systems and bioretention systems as well. They can those can be like your bioswales. They'll clean the water, and then we do have the ability to purify this water for consumption to make it potable. There's a device that would go into your home that would allow you to take that water and drink it. Then it'd be safe to do so. It's probably safe to drink without, but it would require constant biotests to make sure you don't get any choleriform bacteria or anything like that in there. So the purification devices are worth the investment. It kind of ensures against that, and it's really good, fresh, clean water. Oops. Okay, so the biofiltration, here's the green roofs, the vertical gardens, another one you've seen. And then kind of showing you on the bottom of this slide, you'll see the what is called the bioswale. It's what would be between the sidewalk and the road. And you can see the plant life on top. Then you'll see there's coarse river sand. And then coming across is a flow channel. And then the very bottom here is the flow cell. You can see it's kind of like stacked too high. And so think of that you look at the horizontal. If you're looking at the vertical sense going along the roadway, the water's flow is going to be under there, so that by the time the water gets into there, all of the sediment from the roadway has been filtered out by these plants. All of those oils will be consumed. Those plants will actually, it'll break down in terms of like a fertilizer for them. All of the sediment is held by a geotextile between here and the flow cell, so the flow cell does not clog up and it doesn't fill up with sediment. And so by the time the water gets in, it's just water, and only dissolved nutrients get in there. All of your nitrogen and phosphate are going to flow along, and that's what by flowing through these cells with the matrix that's in there, aerates the water, getting all those bubbles in it, and that's what makes it clean by the time it comes out the other side. All the nitrogen and phosphates have been aired out. So total suspended solids loads by 85%, phosphorus loads by 65%, and nitrogen by 45%. Pretty substantial. And then so here's an example of residential developments. If some areas require, for runoff, you can put this on the edge of the development so that water's not flowing out into any kind of major body of water. Here's a Seabreeze state concept of how it would look, depending on what you're putting it under. So the images I would ask to draw your attention to are the ones to the right. These are just different. With this system is very versatile, like Legos. We can apply it any way we need to. We can change the shape, the way it's configured, the way it's laid out, so that it fills the space we have to work with. If you're at the bottom of a hill, if you need to make it extra thick there, if you're in a valley, or if you're just on a general slope, there's all the different ways of adjusting it to fit whatever application you need. Here's just a sample project, upstream filtering, because there was water flowing out into the ocean. This is in, I believe, Australia, I'm pretty sure, where the same thing was flowing out to the ocean, where they stopped it all from happening by changing this along the roadway. Important, and I'll also provide you guys with all these slides as well, so you can have them. Water quality improvement, the improvement rates of that turbidity, your dissolved salts, your zinc. You notice the improvements on those, how significant those numbers are. And the real nasty one on the far right, PB, is lead. 99.5% elimination of lead. that's in the water. So that's huge, especially if you live in Flint, Michigan. Another example, here's the pH levels of water improvement, just to give you an idea what those are. If someone asks those technical terms, we can calculate that for them, you know, for a specific customer if they really need to know that. That's typically only concerned in an agricultural area, which could be a lot of where you guys deal with, but if it's not, then not really concerned. It depends on where the water's going and what they're doing with it. That's going to matter where those numbers really come into play. So here's an example of permeable pavement. So you can see it right along this roadway behind these cars, that area where it changes color, that's a porous concrete. So the sediment doesn't go in there, but the actual below that is the flow cell, and all that water is being collected underneath and then flowing along without the roadway flooding up, which is a real huge advantage. It's getting into sustainable water solutions. Here are the different flow tank modules, and you've got, you know, basically the one I had at the show was just a single sample, but you stack these literally like Legos. So if you're filling in a huge amount of space, you can really, which they get quite large. The beauty of the versatility of that, you can fit any shape you need to. Strength is absolutely amazing. I wonder if it's got the slide we're going to show you. It's about, I think it's about 500 tons per square meter. So it's really, really strong. You could, in theory, build on top of this. We don't recommend doing that because if you need to go in and service these things, you know, you have to dig a hole in your floor of the building to do that. Not advisable, but you can park on top of them. That's the important thing. They are under the New Jersey Turnpike and they are DOT compliant. That whole entire system is, and and it does not freeze. It doesn't clog up with snow or when they spray the cinders out every year for this. If you've been up north with the snow and ice coming down, it works fine and very, very well. So your isotropic strength is tremendous. The way in which the matrix is laid out is what actually keeps this integrity. Kind of like trying to crush an eggshell universally. You can squeeze and squeeze and squeeze, and it never goes anywhere. So the triangle design is the most load bearing and most worthy. That's what we've tested, tried and true. All the others we've tried, Atlantis has actually gone through testing on these and tensile strength and also compression testing. The triangle one's the most effective, and that's what the Atlantis systems are made out of. And then we do all the quality control before it goes out. Of course, they do the due diligence before they ship anything to make sure that it's going to be compliant. So stuff doesn't get to you defective by any means. All right, high intake stormwater capture and treatment. We're just going to go through here's the infiltration, detention, and retention. The difference being detention is just basically like you're being held back a little bit and then released eventually. So these where the flow tank is configured in such a way that's under this parking lot. And then once that fills up, then it will release out. Then infiltration is where the water is collected in there, but it seeps out of this. There's no, this is a porous textile around the infiltration. So the water's allowed to seep in and leach into the ground if you have an artesian well type of thing going on. But by the time it seeps in again, it's been cleaned. It's not going to, you know, throw things off on your drinking wells and that sort of thing. And then finally, on-site retention. If you want to keep your water, and you can see you've got this tank here with a pump so that you can use it for either spray irrigation. It can be used for consumption. The water is very, very clean. There was a case where this place was vacant for, I think, 20 years. They went back and they tested the water that was in the Atlantis tank, and it was safe to drink. There was nothing wrong with it at all. After 20 some years of not being just regular rain runoff going in there, really, really impressive. The only, I mean, I would say it more than likely is after a fresh rain, you have the possibility of getting any bird excrement or something like that in there, which could give you a choleriform issue, which wouldn't last very long, but it would be there immediately after. So we don't drink right from the tank routinely. You'd have to test it all the time to make sure it was safe. However, there's a purification system that can be added to your home if you wanted to do that, but it can be done. So here's just basically how a detention tank works. And you can see this, I can send you again the schematic here. You can see where the primary capture area is coming in. And there's a little tiny bucket that goes into these to capture your sediment. And then you pull out, that's like a 5-gallon bucket. You pull that out once every so often, depending on what your precipitation rate is. And I can tell you it's probably once every 3 to 6 months. And you can dump that in a compost pit or something. Way, way cheaper than maintaining current civil engineering is with baffle boxes. And those things got to be maintained once, twice a week. And then your overflow is this final tank here for storage if you need it. That's how the tank configuration lights work. And they can be placed anywhere on your property. So in this case here, it's under the driveway in this diagram. And then you have the same thing under your lawn if you got a bioswale. And then all your water's reclaimed. And then if you live in a place like Phoenix, I would actually put one of these in just because I live in Phoenix. I would want to have water security. And here's another configuration of the tank of the water harvesting system. And this is just showing you an example of how water can be pumped back out and used for irrigation. Maintenance, again, Very, very simple. The beauty of this stuff is that, so you've got a maintenance channel, you can see set and build up way before it happens, if it happens at all, which it shouldn't unless your actual maintenance channel overflows. That 5-gallon bucket I was telling you about, you pull it out and send it on its way. Here, this is a huge value. Do you guys, what part of the country are you guys in?
I'm from California. It's
Are
pretty
all you guys
exciting stuff, Jason.
Oh, thank you. Are all you guys in California, or is everybody west? Is everybody out west of Mississippi, or is anybody east end?
Chicago.
I'm in Connecticut.
Oh. Oh, okay. So we got two Easterners. These the retention ponds. They're not typically common in drought prone areas, but they are very common in the East Coast, because if you have like a certain area, if you build up a certain area of paved with a Walmart or something like that in the parking lot, you have to have a retention pond for what's going to run off, because your impact of the system is so substantially greater because you have so much paved space. The beauty of this tank is it goes under your parking lot, so all of that real estate is reclaimed, and that's huge value for a lot of folks. And you can see here, so 340,000 cubic feet for a shopping center expansion. It's 4 Olympic swimming pools of water. There's the after. So in most cases here in Florida, if you guys along Route 1, a lot of those retention ponds are on prime real estate. They're right smack on the freeway alongside of the parking lot for the Walmart or whatever. That's the real estate they'd much rather use for other things. And it's unfortunate because the water reclaimed in those is horrible. They are a biohazard. They are full of toxins. The way in which the evaporation occurs, you build up a lot of sediment on the bottom, and then water evaporates off, but the impurities don't. I looked at one. I got called to a site. The guy said he put fish in there, and they boiled. And I'm thinking, okay, well, who's heating the water? I get that it was not that they boiled from the heat. It was just that much phosphate had built up. It was turquoise green. It was so bad. So that's, it means don't stick your fingers in that. I don't even want to begin to imagine what's in there, but it's not good for you to touch it. It's just horrible. And it's not biologically friendly at all. It's going to clearly kill stuff. I mean, relatively fast as well. Most folks, if I had a retention pond, I want to have fish in it. I want it to be alive. So this would help you do that. And then, oh, here's New Jersey Route 1 widening as well. They did the same thing. And you can see how deep these can get. You can really pack these things in there if you've got the space, wherever your space happens to be, and they can be customized to fit in that space. And that's going to retain a load of water. I mean, a real lot when you're going 4 cells deep like that. So the same thing here on the Reserve Park, Tennessee, and this one's in Houston, Texas. You got between 2 parking decks. The nice thing about that, you can't go up too high because obviously the parking deck's already in the way, but you can see retrofitting. We can dig down deep and dig a trench low enough to fit these in. That one is actually a retention or a reclamation system that's going to retain the water because it's got an impervious textile going around it, so it's an actual tank. And you can see here where they lined it with the geotextile all the way around. And here's just another large example of how that can go in sports complex, where this is going underneath the running track. You can tell by the angle of turn. Rain gardens and bioswales, these can go just about anywhere you got. If you've got swales up, I know up north, you probably have that little patch of grass between the actual roadway and the sidewalk curb, Sean, I think. And then Chicago, same thing. I'm not sure out west if you guys have probably the xeriscapes most likely. These can be similar to that. You can put succulents in there, like cactus will the things that are drought tolerant because they'll get dry for a while. But I personally, the flash floods you have in Vegas that they have those big, huge, quick rains. All that water right now is in the civil engineering, flushes out to the desert and just gets evaporated right off. And I really think that, and yet we're worried about the water levels on the Colorado River getting so low. A lot of this kind of stuff would reclaim and be recaptured, and if it's stored under the ground at the ground temperature, it's going to be around for a while. It won't evaporate off, and that would help you minimize a lot of your impact as far as water, water concern would be, because you're not going to need nearly as much. And then if they mandate to use that for irrigation, which they could, you could easily irrigate one of these sports fields with that sort of thing. All right, and then biofiltration and harvesting was kind of another application of the same thing. You can see where it's wrapping around this building, and then you can see that pond is not clean. This is before. That pond's kind of got a tint to it. I can tell it's got buildup of minerals and sediment that you don't want. Here's just another application where you can hide these things. You can see that. So the lower right is that nice, pretty green grass there. It's buried underneath. You can't really see it's there, but it does the job. All right. Sample cross section. This is showing you again, different example of where it's going, you can see where the curb ends, the grass starts, the permeable pavement on the street, and then the roadway itself, and then how it's reclaimed underneath. important thing to know that the replacement of the tank, see those big, huge tanks that the most common things we have here in the US, the cost is much, much higher. That is just a plain water tank. That is going to be full of Lord knows what bacteria. It's never going to clean the water because of the shape of it. The water doesn't churn, doesn't move. These things, the way our Atlanta system works, it allows you to, by the water building up inside with the matrix of the triangle system in there, the water's never ever stagnant. Even though it's in a solid case where it's not moving at all, there's still slight movement in water. It never is perfectly still. And it keeps the water from producing the spools and everything. And that's kept at ground temperature. It's also kept in the dark. You don't have the algal blooms in there either. So that's a huge example or huge advantage. One thing I also forgot to point out, because the water is claimed under the bioswale, you get rid of those wonderful pests that we have to deal with all summer long called mosquitoes. And as I recall, I don't know about Connecticut, but I know in Chicago, they'll sting right through triple thick blue jeans because they're just evil and lethal. Especially when I was in Wisconsin, the mosquitoes go right through anything because they've got places to standing water. This eliminates that standing water. The water is standing, but it's below the ground where they can't get air for themselves. They want to be on the surface with that water where it's exposed to the sunlight. That doesn't happen here. So it's a chance for that to stop, to minimize that. You don't have standing water inside the swale, it goes below. So a huge advantage again. You guys, is anyone familiar with aquascapes?
What was that?
Is anyone familiar with aquascapes? Have you guys heard of aquascapes?
I could see this is first I've heard of it.
Okay, well, just what it sounds like. So aquascapes is basically putting landscaping in with a aquatic touch. The beauty, the nice thing about the system is it often can be used and adapted in these kind of situations where you have, like, there's the shed. Oh, Chicago. There's the shed aquarium. Was it Jennifer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
The shed aquarium's got one of these on the side of it. I mean, and below that, underneath that whole entire system is one of the Atlantis flow systems, the flow cells behind it. And it's reclaiming that same water over and again, but it's cleaning it every single time. So it's not picking up all kinds of nasties at the bottom that would normally be happening. It's kind of self-sustaining. The only thing they're powering is the pump on that. And you can really do some impressive landscape features with an aquascape system. And they're really, really nice. And then you're reclaiming all your water and storing it cleanly. Okay. And then Titan tanks, these get to be quite large. These are for the really high load situation. So if you have minimal cover, high load, so that's most applicable like a parking deck situation, but we can accommodate for it. And then finally, let's see, so the flow cells are on the left there. You can see there's the gravel cell if you're going to put gravel in it, and then there's also a turf cell if you want to use that if you're going to grow grass. So you want something that's so you can actually make a driveway out of grass, put the turf cell in that holds it in place. You can mow it like you normally would, but you can also drive on it without killing the grass. These flow logs is an Australian term, but basically, it's a place where if you have a constant ponding area that you can't get the water to ever drain out of, you put one of these in, it allows the water to flow to a deeper point somewhere else. So you don't have a constant flooding area or flood zone. And then this in particular one is down in, it's in Jacksonville, Florida. We also have one down in Fort Lauderdale. That's a very similar system where they stop the water from flowing down the street and into the lagoon. And this again, you can see the turf cells, or these are the paver cells on top. All right, here's how that looks if you're looking at a cross section. Turf cells, the one on top, the very top layer on the right, you see the grass growing out of it, and that the 52 millimeter paver holds all that in place. So you're not, even when you drive on it, it's grass, but it's not going to wash away. In other words, if you drove on grass, it eventually turns into mud, and then when a good rain comes, that whole top layer gets washed out. This preserves that top layer. The grass grows back, and then it's keeping it in place. Then you've got growing media underneath that supports it, so that it's like usually a coconut core or something inert. Washed coarse river sand, that's what is going to clean your water as it's going in. And the final, the actual flow channel is below that even, and there is where your water flow is going to go down to a retention tank on either side of your property. So if this was your driveway, you're on the left or right channel. Then I say about this is you have a green grass driveway, but it's paved, very unique. And then for you guys out west, the compacted gravel is the way to go, because what the top cell is doing is the gravel cell is holding the gravel in place, so it's not constantly being blown away or run. When you have a gravel road, it's got to be resurfaced or regraded every so often. This eliminates that. But then when you do get those infrequent flash floods, those heavy torrential downpours, all that water can be reclaimed and go into a flow channel along the side of the road, and then that can be put into you can have reservoirs every so often, however you wish in your subdivision, which is really nice for again for water reclamation, especially if you're dealing with a drought situation. All right, here's another example. You can see a zero scape. That's just what it would look like on for a cross section. And here's the full profile. This is just under regular. This would be like under a sports field where it's just going to be grass. You're not using the gravel or the turf cell. Green roofs are a huge thing lately. And I know they. I've seen them in Connecticut. I know that they're not restrictive to warm climates, so you can do this just about anywhere. There is a weight issue to consider because it does weigh a lot more than a traditional roof. That's a lot more, meaning like literally almost double, but not much more than that. It's not prohibitive where you have to have like 2 feet thick of dirt. It's only about 6 inches of dirt, and most of that's actually a flow which with like a grow medium that allows water to pass through. So it's reclaimed over and over again, and then it's going along your channel on the edge, and that's not accumulating on your rooftop over time. But that gives you a huge advantage as far as HVAC costs because you're not absorbing all that heat from the sunlight all day long. And that's going to keep your building much cooler, much cheaper to maintain and take care of and keep the place cool. All right, and then let's see, roof gardens example, and this one's in Singapore. Ecological advertising. This I thought was kind of cool. If you've been in an airplane, this one, this I believe is near Toronto. The Target building. That's one of their distribution centers, and they've got that big, huge Target up top, and it says Target, which you can read from an aircraft. And it's that's actually, I believe, I want to say the purple part or the reddish part is actually lavender, and the center is Bermuda grass. So the whole thing's alive, and lowering your heat costs, giving you fresh air. It's really advantageous. Finally, vertical gardens. These are all you guys have seen. You can configure these matrices to put the grow walls in such a way that you can actually stack them on an angle like this one shows in the Grow Wall Pro. And then you can put the facade around a building. You can also use the flow cell in a different way where you've got the grow wall facade, where it's like basically that matrix, instead of being under the gravel under a road upside of a building, it allows a path for something to grow on it, like an ivy or something like that, which maybe if you're in a rush and you need to do it cheaply, that's a much less expensive way to do it. You can cover a lot more space a lot faster. Of course, it's not going to give you as much advantage as a proper grow wall will, but it's a start. So if somebody's got a low entry point and that's where they want to begin with, that could be one advantage to do that. The other advantage there is that if it's moving, let's say it's their gate or something like that, and they want to make it green, you can with the grow wall facade, and then the whole gate can slide with that thing attached to it. Righty, and then effectiveness of green infrastructure. This slide kind of gives you an idea of how you're improving the air quality. When air flows in between buildings, it kind of circulates around like this naturally. And because it's circulating around with green infrastructure there, as opposed to concrete, it's getting cleaned. Dust is getting pulled out because the plants absorb that. They're wet, and they actually soak it in, and it breaks down into fertilizer over time. But most fertilizers for green is petroleum based that we spray. So it's eliminating a lot of that out of the atmosphere, and then it's giving you back fresh air in the middle of an urban jungle. And these are just some examples of where these walls have been used. You can see Dubai on there, Turkey's on there, Santiago, Chile. The fact that Dubai and the built-in irrigation system allows you to put them in desert climates, and they don't, because the irrigation system is completely, it's not spraying the front of it with water. It's actually enclosed through tubing behind the facade, so it's going directly into the plant, into the soil, and not just going all over the place and making a big mess. So you're not losing much to evaporation. All right, and that brings us to what you guys want to beat me up about.
Well, this was fantastic information. Here in California, and we were doing a lot of green technology, but nothing that I've seen like this. But a question: are you doing anything with the hemp products? Especially using it in replacement of plastics, and also some of the factors that hemp has, 1,001 uses, and for building and construction.
I get that question a lot. Regrettably, in the U.S., no. Outside the U.S., yes. Mm-hmm. There's and then not because I'm anti-American of any sort. The regulations here are such that it's just a difficult thing. Well, and I think that's starting to change, and there's an invitation to that right now, which is with the level of things I've got going on. Hemp is definitely an up and coming thing, because I think that's going to be the faster way to biosynthetics. I definitely think it's the way to biofuels. We can 1 acre of hemp can produce enough diesel fuel. I mean, I got it last time I did the math on it, was about 30 cents a gallon. Yeah. And that's carbon negative. So what I mean by that is if you burn 1 gallon of hemp diesel fuel, as opposed to producing 1 gallon of hemp diesel fuel, the carbon uptake for that hemp plant is 5 times what that 1 gallon is going to put back out, because you've got all the other factors, the stalk, the leaves, and everything else that's sucking in all that CO2,
Right.
giving you back the oxygen. You're producing a negative, even burning that diesel fuel, you're making a negative carbon impact. So there's a lot of advantages to the hemp stuff. It's just the political sensitivity of it just makes it a little bit tricky.
Yeah. No, I think that's it's in line with some of the things, especially like you said, outside of the United States. I know we have a gentleman on that's from the Caribbean, and hemp's probably a resource they could utilize for some of the things that you're doing here.
I would have to agree. There's also, I mean, one thing I've studied, but we haven't been able to apply it yet, but remediation of the soil with hemp is another advantage, tremendous advantage there. Especially, I'm sure if I was in Ohio, I'd definitely be pushing for it right now with what's happened there with that train derailment.
Oh, yeah.
The fact that he was kicking those rocks and I saw a sheen, I'm like, okay. I mean,
Yeah.
it just screamed dioxin to me. I'm thinking, oh boy, you know, I was a hazmat tech, so maybe that's the first thing we would have tested for immediately. And most likely it's some derivative thereof. It's not something you want to be breathing or touching, even if it's small quantities over long periods of time, like what happened in the Love Canal. You know, that's when you start running into problems, because your body being exposed to that for long periods of time is not good.
Yeah. And one more question, follow-up question, is soil remediation. You know, but here in California, we have a lot of areas that have been impacted by chemicals and things like that, especially on military bases. Some of the things that I see there would help alleviate some of these areas. Have you dealt with any Superfunds remediation components, like rail yards?
I have professionally, not for Argo Sciences. I have done that for when I was still on active duty. That was my job, so I've got experience. You know, I've been exposed to them. I've got experience to them.
Okay. Yeah, there's quite a few areas that could be utilized to help alleviate some of those issues that we're dealing with here in California. Very good.
California is a really great place in a lot of ways, because you've got such a diversity of landscape there. You've got mountains, you've got desert, you've also got some wet spots. You've got, you know, see really good diversity of climate. And a lot of this has to do with, you know, so the Colorado River, for example, there's joint agreements. It goes through so many states. By the time it gets to Lake Mead, you know, it's been heavily depleted. There's a lot of like local municipalities that are stuck doing things on their own. The more we decentralize things like that, the less you know, the less impact major events will have. So if Las Vegas, I realize, yes, it's a drop in the bucket when you think about a place like Vegas or even like San Fernando Valley, to have them be self-sufficient, but that's all the less impact they put on the major system. So when they start locally with the smallest scale, the fewer and fewer people that are contingent and dependent on these big massive infrastructures, the less strain they put on them, and you kind of dilute it out. So it's less and less of an impact on their end as far as usage goes as well. If that makes sense, if you follow me there.
Yes, I do.
Hey, Jason, these green walls, is there any specific type of plantage that you can put there? Is it you know, anything edible here, or is this just really just for facade kind of?
It's your option. The edible, we can do edible. You can put edible in those. So what you would do is at the base of the wall, which you can't see in this picture, there's a trough that's reclaiming the water.
Mhm.
And then to make them edible, instead of using soil, you would use a regular hydroponic grow medium, whether it be vermiculite or perlite or coconut coir or any of those. And then you're going to run the irrigation on a separate pump from like just regular water. And you're adding your nutrients to that the same way you would, say, the tower garden or any of your hydroponic nutrient solutions that get dissolved. And then you can grow basil or you know, a lot of your leafy greens, anything, just about anything are growing in. The buckets are 2 gallons each, the individual wall buckets. So I mean, there's a sizable root base in there. You can actually get a head of lettuce out of that with ease. That's a full size one. Now, the rest, most of the time they're aesthetic more than anything, but you can make food production out of them. Yes. The only thing you got to watch out for is if you're inside, you want to make sure you have the proper lighting.
Right. No, that's great. I appreciate that, Jason. not sure if anybody else has any questions, but this is a fantastic overview. You guys offer a ton of different opportunities, things like that. So we definitely will be, providing your services to, all over based on the needs. So this is definitely great.
Okay, like I said, we're our resources are your resources. So if you need help with something, or if somebody's got technical questions, but do not hesitate to reach out. Does everyone have my email, or can you give it to everyone, Sean?
If you want to, I can certainly get it, but I mean, if you want to, let me just see if I can
Pop it in the chat here.
Yeah, don't pop it in the chat.
Yeah, Sean, there's a group of people I'd like to follow up with you on for to do another presentation. This was so much information here.
Yeah, most definitely.
I'm in the process of doing site feasibility studies right now on various areas for development. And you're based out of Florida, Jason?
Yep, Vero Beach.
Okay. I've got a conference out there in Florida. Maybe I'll go check out some of those projects that you listed.
Yeah, I can get their closest one to Vero is going to be down. Well, which for the grow wall, or do you want to see the flow cell?
Well, I'm going to be in Miami, so I might be doing
that it's in Fort Lauderdale. Let me see if I can see if I can get a site visit for you. Are you coming to the same conference, the safety one, or is that was last month or last week, wasn't it? The emergency responders conference?
No, this is the other one, Sean, that's coming up in March.
Yeah, this is in Miami though, right? I thought, is that?
Yeah, that's what.
Well, this is. I thought it was last weekend.
Wasn't it the first week?
Did I miss it?
Maybe
I'm getting a few of my conferences to get.
I think so.
But I'm supposed to go out there to Miami for another conference that we're having. But I'll talk to you more about that.
That's fine. Sounds good.
Hmm.
Excellent.
Hey, Jason, can you just go over briefly again about the residential uses for the water reclamation?
Sure. I'd love to do that. Actually, let me get the. I'll get the residential slide for you. Like it's I find it always best to show the pretty pictures if I can.
And I'm assuming this would lower people's water bills.
Get rid of it.
Oh, wonderful.
Oh, I can be.
I
I gotta
want to be clear on that.
I will go back and turn on my screen share if I can.
Should be able to.
All right, so what you're seeing there, that's a detention tank with attenuation, but okay, it's in the schematic here, you see that it's also showing the roof, just to show you the full blown, if you had the ability to do a rooftop system, or a green roof rather. There is the bucket I told you about with it, which is filtration unit. And then you got your wash river sand, and then this whole thing is geotextile wrap. Plastic liner required in certain areas only. And the plastic liner is doing two things. It's stopping any groundwater from coming in, because it's not necessarily clean, especially if one of your neighbors is spraying Roundup on their lawn. You don't want that water seeping into your drinking water. And then it also makes sure that you have control over what's being done inside of here. So it's a sealed liner, but you're collecting everything on the surface. The lawn here is turf cell. And then the discharge control pit is basically, if once your tank is full, any overflow is then going to flow into that. And then you can see here's a footprint of one under a house. That right there is enough water to take care of your family for probably see, we used 3,500 gallons a month, and I had 5 people in the house at the time, one of which was a 3-year-old, and I don't know how this happened, but with a 3-year-old, the washer dryer ran every single day. I don't know how, but we still, and that was in Colorado, where you had a graduated cost where the more you use, the more they charged you, because they want to discourage any kind of excessive water usage.
Right.
There's an application for that tank, right? Of course, that's an artist or a computer rendition, but that type of system, depending on where you're at, I can calculate if you tell me where you want to put it. I know in Chicago, you would, if you put something like that in, you would not need city water. The only challenge to that is it takes about a year to fill it. Not literally, but 6 months probably, or maybe 3 months. You need some precipitation to get it started. And so kind of like a pool, sometimes call the fire department, have them fill it for you the first time. But once you're going, unless you go through, like here right now, we're coming up on almost 2 months of no rain in Florida. I probably would have used about half of that if I had one here at my house. And the only reason we have 2 wells here, we have an abundance of water, so it's not really necessary where we're at, but places would sometimes need to.
And does it do well with like the burrowing kind of animals, like the moles and voles?
They don't go in it.
Sometimes.
So the beauty of the polypropylene roots are very, very powerful. And that's another advantage over civil engineering too. Roots penetrate. They always have to clean roots out of systems. The roots don't bother with this because the polypropylene roots basically work. If they've showed them in slow motion, they kind of crawl. Polypropylene's got a smooth edge, but it's not the stuff that it binds to, like concrete, they'll crawl across that. The same with tar. Even the polypropylene, they won't, because they can't get a grip on it. They literally go right around it. They don't bother. So they just, and the same thing, there's no incentive for an animal to come in because they have to bore. They wouldn't get past the geotextile because they won't like the taste of it. It's plastic, or it's a polypropylene, but it's a polymer. So it's environmentally safe, but to them, it's not an appealing thing. They don't find it appetizing. Moles will always burrow where they're following the scent or they're following a route along the ground. And they're looking a lot, and you'll see, like, if you ever follow a mole track, they're following a route, because a route carries water, which water carries insects, and they eat those. The roots won't go into this stuff, so you really don't have to worry about the roots getting into it. Or the same thing with local wildlife.
And one last question, because I'm curious personally. So if a person were to install this for their home, would they eventually need to replace like the plumbing so that it's completely clean water going into the house? Like if it's old plumbing already?
You would no, the plumbing itself should be fine unless something wrong with it. Once you flush it out with the new clean water, it's just the same as what's coming out of there. It's not gonna carry the old stuff with it. You would, at the entry point of the home where your water service comes in, if you're familiar with a well system, you have a pressure tank, and then you've got a regular 0.5 horsepower or 1 horsepower pump, depending on the size pipe you have coming in your house. You would install one of those, and that would give you your consistent pressure throughout the home. Same thing like an RV has, so to speak. And that would give you pressure throughout the home. And then it would just, instead of pulling from the city pressure, you would actually just be pulling out of this tank all the time.
Thank you.
Yep. So the function is the same as a cistern, same as a well, except you're using this tank instead.
Do you have any costs? That tank there that you show there with that house, what kind of cost are we looking at for something like that? Just ballpark. I know we have a retail agreement and everything, but I'm doing a feasibility study on doing some of these things that we've been putting together for Rentech. Is that something I could query?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I'm going to do something very unorthodox. I'm going to count. These are 2 cells deep. 1, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 20. All right. So there's 320 cells in that whole block. Oh wait, times 2, because it's double. Okay, double depth. Yeah. 640 cells, and they run.
And we're still working on some pricing, right, Jason?
Yeah, and I know we could go the
Well-
retail route. I was just
Yeah.
curious because I'm just putting some feasibility numbers on some of these technologies, Sean.
Yeah.
And I'll tell
sure.
you more. But
That setup there, you're looking at about 25,000. That's with your geotextile, your coarse river sand, everything. That's your whole,
Mhm.
that's everything you see in that picture.
And that's based on what you feel the house could utilize for the size it is.
Yeah,
So-
for that, I mean, I was guesstimating based on that. I mean, you may not need that many, you may need more.
is that typically, what size home is that? About a 2,500 square foot home, or would be more or less?
I say about 2,000 square feet. Because you got that garage is gonna take a big chunk of it, so yeah, I'm gonna say 2,000 square feet. Now, a selling point, I would put, if it was my house and if I was trying to, do my space efficiently, my guess would be, notice no one has a lawn as big as this house does. This was just done for graphics sake. I would shape this a little more rectangular and I put it under my driveway.
Mhm.
Sure, yeah, makes sense.
Just because why, if it's a townhouse, for example, you got this, where this lady's standing watering her grass, you got a wall going right there. There's no room for it. So the advantage of that, something I want to make sure you realize that's something to consider. And again, the ideal time to put these in is when they're already excavating, because that skips your excavating cost. Because to dig the hole for this thing at the same time is effortless.
Mhm.
So that keeps your price down low. And again, we may be able to do it cheaper. I was just racking up numbers. I
Yeah.
mean, maybe to get it down a little bit cheaper.
And Jason, this is really the cells and then the man hours, cost to put it in, that type of thing.
Right, you're right. The cell, I want to say, let me go pull up the actual price of the cell as of right now. Just so I'm giving you the most accurate. The floor channel large plates, I want to say they are.
And I would imagine the plumbing that it takes to create this as well. Like there's some other factors outside of just the.
Well, like, you're gonna have a water main coming in the house anyway.
Right.
You're just basically, instead of the water main coming out of the street, or wherever your utility is coming from, it's just gonna come out of this tank.
Right.
So, it's just that one pipe. You're looking at literally, and then, like my house has a 1/2 horsepower pump for the whole
Yeah,
house, and
pump.
we've,
Yeah.
I thought it was like $240, I think, for a
Yeah.
pump, and then a flow tank's another $240. You're looking at under $500 for that whole shebang.
Yeah.
PVC is cheap, fortunately.
Sure.
But do bear in mind, if you're in Chicago, this has got to go below the frost line. So you got, I would want to say Illinois is about 4.5 feet, if I'm not mistaken.
Mhm.
So that's going to be buried down low, and the pump would be in your basement. Assuming, I would think you'd have, most homes in Chicago have a basement, right? I think. That's not right. $28, but that doesn't make sense. $28 on a flow cell on one, the same one that I had out there in California,
Yeah.
Sean.
I remember.
$28.
Yeah.
So you need
650, you said, of those?
640 of those. Yeah, 640 of those times $28 a piece. And then I know at 100, your price is going to come down. So
Yeah. They're just more of an estimate, right, Richard?
Yeah. So the cells, you're looking at $17,920. And then you add, so the textile wrap comes in a big, huge roll, wrapping the whole thing. The river sand we get from your local Lowe's or Home Depot or wherever. Your landscape supplies always have those. They're real easy to come by. And they're not terribly expensive for that quantity. And then, you top it off, and then I'm assuming whoever's building that's going to put their own lawn down. So all those associated costs are stuff to consider. The sports field's one of my favorites, because if they tear up golf courses all the time and redo them, they shift their greens around and what have you. I know down here, golf courses pay an awful lot of money to irrigate them, and there's a lot of pushback because they use this, to keep those courses nice and pretty and green. They spread all kinds of cool chemicals on them.
Yes, they do.
Yeah,
So, being able to reclaim those, but they spend a lot of money on them. Like if you're able to reclaim your chemicals and then put a mechanism to actually see how much was actually recaptured and then use it again, instead of having it just wash out into the ocean, I would think that'd be enticing to them, The problem is getting this slide in front of the decision maker on that and convincing him is like pulling teeth. And that's I've talked to John's Island Club about it half a dozen times, and they will not let me speak to the manager. I mean, there's the Berlin Wall around that guy. And I understand it's just one of those, you just got to be in the right place at the right time and schmooze with people, because they got every Tom, Dick, and Harry trying to sell them this, that, and the other, whatever the latest gimmick is, because they got deep pockets and they know that they're targeted in that regard. It's really unfortunate, but it's just the way it is, unfortunately.
Yeah, most definitely.
But
Excellent.
these are your in my opinion, John's Island Club is of course a very sought after place, but I mean those are your quick ends, my opinion, as far as when you're trying to get a system out there and sold. If you get the environmental gurus, this is the way to take them on this. That's the Sydney Harbor. You can see before when they're building the park, before they did everything. I love the whole thing of it, because of the fact they were able to do that and keep it so clean, and the fact that you can look in a harbor and see right to the bottom. If you've been to the harbors here, if you've been to Philadelphia or Sean, if you've down at Boston Harbor, I don't think anyone's seen the bottom of that thing in living memory. It's just so full of silt and Lord knows what else.
No doubt about it.
I don't know when they switched the sewage system to where. Remember how it used to rain in Boston and the stench, because the brown sewer and the storm sewer were side by side and they'd overflow into one another, and it just went out into the middle of into the harbor and just released. It didn't actually get processed; it just dumped it out in the ocean. The smell was horrible.
Right.
So the officers are just light years ahead of us on marine science, and it's just because they've got so much delicate infrastructure and water.
Right.
But pulling into a harbor like that with shipping and everything going on, the fact that you can see that clean is really remarkable to me.
That's unheard of. Yeah.
yeah, they did a really good job.
Yeah.
That's
And,
nice.
and then they've also gotten, they do deal with some drought situations where they've reclaimed all that water, and that's they've eliminated that. So that's, you can see where my passion comes from. This a lot of this stuff, if we can build habitats on Mars, why the heck aren't we fixing our backyard? That it was Florida, which I'm not saying I'm all about going to Mars. I mean, that's a wonderful project. It's great that if it wasn't for these kinds of things that people building on the moon or trying to, I would not have learned the stuff I did. It helped me see, okay, wait, let's think outside the box a little bit. If this works here, why don't we apply it downstairs, in our living room? So, and again, charity starts at home. Wherever we can apply things in our own lives. I mean, one by one, I've converted all my light fixtures to low voltage. Slowly but surely, I'm about to change my roof out. I'm getting a inert roof that's unfortunately I can't do a green roof here because of the wind and issues, but I can do a solid metal roof as opposed to shingles. And then I'm reclaiming all that water in a flow tank eventually, because even though we're okay in Florida, it's still nice to that redundancy for just the sake of food security and water security is tremendous, because aquifers do get contaminated, as Flint, Michigan found out. In fact, while that was going on, we'd gotten a letter here about the aquifers, because the watershed makes its way down to the center part of the country and does have tributaries that dendril out underneath the crust. So I guess that someone feared that maybe the lead was going to get this far down. I don't think so, but it is possible. But aquifers can get contaminated, and this buffers you from that. One more shield of protection.
Yeah, no doubt.
And that's when when you have any kind of breakdown of social structures or anything like that, when you have disasters, it just buffers you from a whole lot of grief. If we decentralize things like power and we decentralize things like water, we're not so vulnerable. So if a tornado goes through a subdivision, it only hits the 2 or 3 houses. That you only hit 2 or 3 houses, as opposed to taking out the entire subdivision's power because the substation's gone. That's huge, because then it's a lot easier to bear that brunt when you've got neighbors that are able to support and help out that are not also in the same boat. So it's a huge advantage, and it just makes for longer safety and much more sustainable way of life.
Sounds good. Well, hey, thank you so much, Jason. We'll definitely continue to provide this information in front of as many people as we can. And Yasan was just on, and he would love to have you. He actually runs a radio show, and he's out of the Caribbean, and they've got some some great agricultural aspects down in the Caribbean, as you mentioned. So that could be an option for you. So we'll see how that goes. All right.
Yes, so a radio show. Okay, yeah, I've done radio shows before. Be happy to do one if you want.
Well, we'll talk more about that. But let me go ahead and stop the recording.